Everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Live from the Heartland show. Out of Chicago, here in the 49th Ward, the Fighting 49th. I am Michael James, and I'm really glad to have you tuning in. And whether you're listening or viewing, however you're getting it, we've got a couple of really interesting segments coming up today. I'm going to have Lauren Pineiro and Chrisley Carpio, two members of the Tampa Five. That's the Students for Democratic Society group at the University of South Florida, who were arrested while trying to talk to the head of the college, the president or the provost, about some draconian laws that DeSantis, the governor down there, has pushed through. And they are going to talk to us a little about what's going on with their case and a tour that they're on. And then we're going to have an old pal, Billy Lamar Brooks, another old radical like myself. He was the Minister of Education of the Black Panther Party. And we're going to have a little bit of a chat. So stay tuned. Before I bring on the first guest, I'd like to let you know that one good thing I noticed was that Donald Trump was indicted in New York for basically committed fraud. And that is a good thing. The other good thing that I'm going to share is something I've been working on. Many of you who listen to this show know that we were involved with the Rainbow Coalition and specifically with Rising Up Angry. And Rising Up Angry was a community-based organization from 1969 to 1975, worked in a lot of neighborhoods around police. We had a Free People's Health Center. All kind of things went on. We worked closely with the Black Panther Party, the Young Lords, the Young Patriots while they were around. And we're having a reunion coming up in a few weeks. So I decided that it was time to put out another photo book. I wrote a piece and we were going to run photographs, but it really turned into a collective effort with a lot of back and forth. And even today, as we record, we're making the final touches before it goes to the printer. But I'm encouraging everyone to pay attention to it because it has a lot of photos from back in the day and a lot of stories, analysis, and information. So I'm real happy about that. And I'm glad that we got it done, almost done. And on the labor front, I'm really glad to see that President Biden was on the picket line along with you striking United Auto Workers. It's a far cry from what Trump did when he went up there and talked to non-union guys at a hall. We'll see how that went. But Biden is the first president that we know of who has joined a picket line. He's put out a very good position, which is the United Auto Workers position. And that is that when the auto industry was in trouble, the United Auto Workers gave back. And now that the auto companies are making big, big bucks, it's time for the workers in the plants get their fair share. And this has ramifications for unions across the board. My own union, the Screen Actors Guild, is out on strike, and the Writers Guild have settled their strike. And this is good. This is good. It's a good time for labor unions, and we have to take advantage and keep pushing it. I do want to point out that a good political person here in the 49th Ward, Art Strobeck, passed away. He worked for the state and he was real active in political progressive politics. There will be a celebration of Art Strobeck's life right after this show airs on WLUW 88.7 or WLUW.org on Saturday the 30th. That afternoon at 1:30, there will be a reception and service at the United Church of Rogers Park, 1545 West Morse Avenue, right here in Chicago in the 49th Ward. Handicap accessible, street parking, everybody is welcome. And then I want to let you know that last week we had Kathy Kelly, who is a longtime peace activist, and Fernando Jones, who's a musician who has set up a blues camp. And we had some wonderful interviews with them. They are both available both on Google and Spotify podcast if you want to listen. Or if you want to listen or view, you can go to youtube.com/heartlandmedia/videos. Okay, so that will be it for this little bit of opening. We'll be right back with a couple of young women who are here in town, Lauren Pineiro and Chrisley Carpio. They are members of the Tampa Five. They were arrested over some draconian laws that the Governor DeSantis has installed down there in Florida, and they are really some inspirational young women. So we'll have them on. And then we're going to have Billy Brooks from the Black Panther Party coming on, and we're going to reminisce about stuff in the past as well as looking forward. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Okay, everybody, it's time to bring on our first guests, and I'm really honored to bring on these two young women. As many of you know, we have been following the case of the Tampa Five, people who were arrested trying to talk to the president of their university about the new laws that the kind of political ogre Ron DeSantis down in Florida has enacted. And they were arrested, and we've been covering them. We had someone from the the new Students for Democratic Society at the University of Illinois, Chicago on, and we've been announcing these young women coming to Chicago. So without further ado, as they say, I'd like to introduce the Live from the Heartland listeners and viewers to Lauren Pineiro and to Chrisley Carpio. Good morning to you both. Well, it's actually good afternoon to you both.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Tell me a little bit about yourselves, just briefly, each of you, where you're from and how you got involved with Students for Democratic Society.
So I'm from Stuart, Florida, which is in South Florida, well, kind of on the cusp of Central and South Florida. And I ended up moving to Tampa in 2021 when I transferred to the University of South Florida. How I got involved with SDS is a bit unconventional, but I actually moved in with two SDSers who kind of brought me to meetings, and I was already a political person and knew I wanted to get more involved in on the ground, direct action kind of work. So that's how I got involved.
And my name is Chrisley Carpio, and I grew up in South Florida, first Miami and then Broward County, but I was actually born in the Philippines. I was born in Cebu City, and I came over when I was 3 years old. I am not a student anymore. I haven't been for some time, actually, but I still like to support SDS. I actually worked on campus. So at USF, until I got fired for going to the protest, I actually worked in the admissions office and was a member of AFSCME Local 3342.
Union woman, good.
Yes.
Well, let's refresh our listeners and viewers about what happened and why you wanted to try to talk to the president of the University of South Florida and what ensued thereafter.
Sure. So there was a lot of things leading up to our protest that kind of inspired us to throw this event. Specifically, Ron DeSantis, our governor, his attacks on the people of Florida, specifically higher education and diversity. He started out with K through 12 schools trying to attack how they speak about race and gender with the Stop Woke Act, what he called it, which really led them to start erasing history, whitewashing history. They watered down the history of people like Rosa Parks. They banned books like Toni Morrison's Bluest Eyes, and actually a lot of classrooms right now don't even have libraries because you have to get it approved in a certain way. AP Psychology is no longer offered in the state of Florida because it discusses gender, and AP African American Studies is also no longer offered because it discusses race. So that was happening in the K through 12 curriculum. But then he moved on to higher education with his takeover of New College, which, if you've never heard of the school, it's in Sarasota, and it's known as being a progressive, inclusive liberal arts college. It's a very small school, only about 700 students, and it is very unique in the way that it operates. But what he did is he removed their board of trustees, put in his own appointed board of trustees, and the first thing that they did was get rid of any offices related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. They later ended up abolishing the gender studies department as well. So all of this was happening, and we knew that our school was probably next, right? New College was just the beginning. It was the blueprint of what DeSantis wanted all colleges to look like. So he actually requested information on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion at all of the schools. And our school, the University of South Florida, responded by putting the search for vice president on pause, vice president for the DEI office on pause because of the uncertainty of the future of these offices. They also easily handed over information to him about trans students' medical care on campus, which he also requested, despite there being like so much opposition on campus from the students. So we had seen that going on. We also saw House Bill 999, later passed as SB 266, which bans funding for diversity programs, ethnic studies, women's and gender studies, and multicultural groups. So all of this was happening in the background, and we knew we had to do something. Protest is what brought us ethnic studies. It's what brought us women's and gender studies in the 60s and 70s, and we knew that's how we're going to keep them here. So we held a protest on March 6th where we marched to the president's office to get a meeting with her. We wanted her to commit to protecting diversity on campus and to resuming that search for vice president of DEI. So we were in the lobby of the building for not even 5 minutes, just holding signs, chanting, a very standard protest, when about 15 USF police officers entered the building, and the chief of police instigated violence, grabbing a student while she was in the middle of speaking, nearly toppling her to the ground. And from there, all of the police officers joined in brutalizing students. We were all beat, covered in bruises. Students had like their nose rings ripped out. A student was actually groped by the chief of police while she was pinned to the ground. So a lot of violence happened that day. And 4 people ended up being arrested. So Chrisley is one of those people, as well as Gia Davila, Gina Kita, and Laura Rodriguez. And they were charged with a felony for battery on a law enforcement officer, as well as 2 misdemeanors, one for resisting arrest without violence and disrupting campus activity. And that felony carries 5 years in prison.
Is there any footage of this event?
Yeah.
You have footage, you have photographs.
Yes.
Are these campus police or were they city town police?
Yeah, they're campus police, but they technically work under the city police.
Yeah, and they brought us to the city jail and put us in the orange jumpsuits to try to teach us a lesson. And for anyone who wants to see the videos, because there's actually a lot of video of that day, it's how we were able to get press coverage like right as soon as the arrest. I mean, not the people sitting in the jail, but people, who were appalled at what happened to us, donated to help us get out of jail, called in, organized to get us out, basically. People can find these videos and links on our new website, defendthetampa5.org. So if anyone wants, and including the moment where the police chief grabbed the first student mid-sentence, so, just took everyone by surprise. If people want to see it, that's all linked there.
I'm going to look for it. Keep going. You were going to say something?
Oh, yes. I also wanted to kind of talk about everything that happened after the arrest, too, because our case actually kept evolving. The very next day, the students got notice of code of conduct hearings that they would be facing all of these charges from the school, putting suspension and even expulsion on the table. And then I, as a worker, even though I was union, I'd never been written up or disciplined, was put on paid administrative leave, which for public sector workers is code for we want to fire you, but we haven't figured out how to do it yet. So it was clear that, they're going to make this political. They told us not to tell anyone about what was going on. The students were not to talk to their professors. I was not to talk to anyone else at the school aside from HR and a supervisor, but we said, no, we need to speak up.
Yeah.
This isn't right. We can't let them get away with doing this to SDS or any other students who have an opinion and want to just use their First Amendment rights. So we had a press conference that week. We had a rally across the street because we were banned from campus. We found a fighting lawyer who took our case as a group pro bono because she likes to defend protesters. Shout out to Michelle Lambo, the best lawyer in Hillsborough County. And then we resolved to talk about our case and unite people who are under attack from Ron DeSantis. The only discussion of a possible offer, and it was never guaranteed, it was just like, we'll consider doing this maybe if you do this first, was the state attorney wanted SDS to write on paper that the violence was SDS's fault. They wanted us to write on paper that we did battery of law enforcement, a felony which carries 5 years, up to 5 years in prison, and which, all of these were lies, and they wanted us to write letters of apology to the cops, including the one who groped the student. And we said, no way. And they actually doubled the charges on us.
And actually,
Yes.
potential offers, when I found out I was getting charged.
Yeah.
So I wasn't arrested on March 6th. They could have arrested me, but they did not. And I was continuing to be very vocal. I was talking to the press, having protests on campus, and I was sitting in class when I was notified that I was now facing the same exact charges.
Yeah, including the criminal charge. They had to turn themselves in, actually. She had to go in. We had to raise the bail money. This was a month after the fact, so we were all like shocked. We were like, they can keep charging people? This is so messed up. And it's because Lauren hadn't been banned from campus yet and was still leading protests and leading actions. So, they wanted to ramp up the pressure. So we said no to writing the letters of apology. They took 3 of us and added an additional battery of law enforcement on each, so they doubled the counts on 3 of us. So along with the felony added to Lauren and Lauren being added to the case, myself, Gina Kita, and Laura Rodriguez are now looking at up to 10 years in prison for the student protests. So,
this is all sounding pretty draconian.
yeah,
what has been the response of other students on campus, the general community, and even some of the professors and the faculty at the University of South Florida?
The students, the community have really been rallying around us. We've had protests on campus in defense of us, and a lot of people have come out to that. We also had a conference actually in Tampa. It was the emergency conference to defend the Tampa 5, where 130 people showed out from all across the country, actually. We had people from Denver and Texas come, even Michigan, and they all came to support us and to support the call to drop the charges on the Tampa 5 and to say down with DeSantis. So we definitely had a lot of support that way. And actually the SDS chapter at USF right now is campaigning to get to, well, their campaign title is Defend Students, Not Cops. And they're calling for all of the police officers present that day to be fired and for the president, Ria Law, to apologize because she has actually stood by the police and says that we are the ones in the wrong. And yeah, that's, so we've had a lot of students supporting us, especially our SDS chapters, but even outside of them.
Labor union supporting us as well. So I was fired, and now we have a grievance going through my union for wrongful termination. So the restoration of my job with back pay is what we want. The AFSCME Florida Communications Director spoke to the press and said that they thought I should get fair due process, which I was not getting. Part of the attendance of the 130 to our defense conference was the West Central Florida Labor Council, president who not only spoke, but committed along with all the other groups there to get the charges on us dropped. The council went ahead and passed a resolution to say, this is our union sister. She needs her job back. People should be able to protest DeSantis, especially after the anti-union law that he saw passed that's going to decertify public sector unions across Florida. And they've actually been contacting other councils around the country to try to pass this resolution in other places. And we're seeing that actually happen as we go on our tour from Minnesota to Wisconsin and now Illinois. So we're trying to ramp up the pressure as much as we can, and people are standing behind us.
Let's talk a little bit about the tour. Now, you mentioned a few states, so you're moving around, and I know that you were at the Chicago Teachers Union Hall the other night. And give us a little report on the response you're getting, how many people are turning out, and how it may fire you up to keep on struggling against this terrible guy.
Yeah, no, it's been really incredible, the reception we've got from the Midwest so far. We started out in Minneapolis, and they had an event with about 100 people there that were all there to support us. It was really incredible, honestly, going from city to city, meeting all these people who 100% stand with us, are in solidarity with us. I've said this from the beginning, but this is a very difficult situation to be in, but having so many people that agree with us that it's right to protest, that student protests should be allowed on campus, agreeing that DeSantis should not be pushing forward these policies, and that the charges should be dropped on us, is really incredible to see from state to state. We have so much support, and it truly means the world.
How was the Chicago event?
It was fantastic. It was more than 50 people. A lot of really notable folks, like union officials, were there. The president of AFSCME Local 2858 had passed a resolution to say drop the charges on the Tampa 5. And we just got a lot of solidarity. We took pictures with union officials from the Chicago Teachers Union, and it was just like a really lively crowd. It was like an indoor rally. People were coming up with their own chants, say drop the charges. And then very notably, it was an event put on by the Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Oppression. The director of the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Oppression, Frank Chapman, spoke. And it was just a wonderful event. Yeah, very inspiring.
Yeah, and we even went to Appleton, to Lawrence University, which is a very small college, and we still got a really good turnout for the amount of students that are there, and actually raised a decent amount of money, which is really needed with all of our lawyer fees and everything else. Not lawyer fee, a lot. I don't know what the word I'm looking for.
Is your lawyer optimistic about this case? Are there any? Are you thinking about suing either DeSantis or the president, et cetera? Fill us in a little bit on that.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much we can talk about lawsuits, but I will say our lawyer is very confident in our case. She's extremely confident. She knows that we can beat this. Actually, in 2020, she represented a bunch of protesters who were arrested during the George Floyd movement, and she had all of their charges dropped. So she feels very confident in our case.
Yeah, what's the actual situation in the county that Tampa is in? I mean, what's the district attorney like? What's the city government like? I mean, Florida is, we've got DeSantis in there. The Democrats have not been very formidable, and obviously there's a lot of gerrymandering. But I would think that the Tampa, St. Pete area, as well as Miami, might give you some political support from in those ranks.
So our state attorney, the state attorney in Hillsborough County, was actually not elected by the people of Tampa. She was appointed by Ron DeSantis. Her name is Susan Lopez. When he removed the previous state attorney for supporting Roe v. Wade. So she's definitely a DeSantis minion, if you will, and unelected by the people. But she is running for election this coming election. So I guess we'll see what happens there.
Yeah. She's the one who doubled the charges on us. We view this case as really political. So even though it's an unusual case and, our lawyer thinks it's simple, a lot of people we talk to think it's simple. There's the video footage. The cop is grabbing the students. All the cops are beating up on the students. People are just trying to leave the building. We actually did leave the building. 3 of the 4 of us who arrested on day 1 or on the day were actually arrested outside, including myself. But the fact of the matter is that because it's such a political case, because we're going, after the governor's agenda and trying to say no to all of these laws that he's trying to, kind of force upon the people, who knows how it'll play out in the courts. We know that the main way out of it is going to be organizing. That's what it takes to defend the First Amendment, free speech, and the right to protest.
As far as other politicians in the area, we have gotten support from some. So Representative Anna Escamani, who is in Orlando, has come out to our protests and our court appearances to support us. We've also gotten support from Representative Maxwell Frost, also in Orlando. And then at our last court appearance, we had some local politicians come out, like Pat Kemp, who is a county commissioner, as well as Angela Birdsong, who is the president of the Hillsborough County Black Democratic Caucus. Am I missing anything?
Okay. Those were the people.
What's your sense of the direction of the state? I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I also wanted to mention, too, that because we've gotten so much support on this tour, we've actually been even adding getting support from other representatives, such as representatives, city council members in Minneapolis, who actually were part of a telegram that was just sent to the state attorney saying drop the charges.
What is your sense of is Florida? I mean, it would seem to me that it would not be as right-wing as it appears under DeSantis's rule. I think I mentioned earlier, I imagine that there's a lot of gerrymandering and control of the state legislature, but I'm just wondering if you spot any kind of Democratic or Democratic Socialist politicians on the rise that people might pay attention to.
I'm not sure about specific candidates, but I will say the people of Florida do not stand with DeSantis. He's an extremely unpopular governor. With every bill he's been passing, he's been, attacking immigrants, workers, LGBTQ people. Every single bill that is passed, there are people in the streets fighting back. So he is not popular. The people of Florida do not stand with him, and it's going to take everything we can do, every protest, so much organizing to keep our state the way that we want it and to fight for Florida. So I think the people are truly the ones that are running the state.
Yeah. And if there are representatives who want to be known as we are running on a platform of supporting, young people's movements, the student movement, the fight against DeSantis, I think that they should speak up about our case, because in a lot of ways it's a gateway case. So representatives Anna Escamani, Maxwell Frost, and anyone else who wants to talk about a case, I think they only benefit from doing so.
Can you give me any sense about SDS? I mean, I love Students for Democratic Society. It was a big part of my life. It set me on a good path. And I'm just wondering, I know about the University of Illinois Chicago chapter and the University of South Florida chapter now, but are there other chapters, and have they been in touch with you and coming out?
Yes, absolutely. A ton of chapters all across the country. I think we are for a moment, for not a moment, but for a good chunk of time, we were at about like over a dozen chapters, and now we're closer to 2 dozen. We actually have people coming to Chicago October 14th and 15th for the SCS National Convention this year. We have over 100 people registered so far, so that's and there's more registering every day. So that's really exciting. And National STS is, I think, it's fighting back. It's, doing everything it can to put an end to this wave of right-wing attacks. We actually have a national campaign to save diversity programs, ethnic studies, and women and gender studies across the country, because there are copycat bills, but even blue states that call themselves blue, are cutting ethnic studies and academic programs across the board. So STS is fighting, and we're going to win.
Let me ask you to repeat very slowly some contact information, like to view the footage and how to get a hold of you guys at STS at University of South Florida.
Yes, so the best way is our new website, defendthetampa5.org, and that's 5 a digit. And that has a contact page where you'll find our social media information. We have an email that you can contact us at if you want to host us, or if you've passed a resolution for us, you can email it there. We should mention too, and that's basically our contact information, the best way to find us. We want support because we are going to trial. December 12th is where trial proceedings start. If you're part of an organization, if people can pass resolutions of support to drop the charges, and write a letter to the state attorney, Susan Lopez, and our prosecutor, Justin Diaz, to say drop the charges, that would be honestly amazing. We're sending everything we can to them. We want people to know that, if they're going to send us protesters to prison, they're going to do it in front of the whole country. So that's the best way to help us. And there will be calls to protest our trial December 12th. So for anyone listening, please answer the call.
Oh, it sounds like you've got a lot going on around this, and it is pretty outrageous. But then again, there's a lot of politics in this country that has reared its ugly head. We always knew we had racists and subtle fascists, but they're out in the open these days. How are you two holding up, and how are the other people who were arrested holding up?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously not an easy time, but we have each other, and we also have so many people standing behind us. The solidarity that we have gotten has been keeping me together this entire time, knowing that there are people willing to fight for us, willing to still protest. Like the same day that everyone was arrested, there were SDS chapters holding protests. A week after, FSU SDS had the exact same protest we had, where they marched into their president's office and they got a meeting with the provost. So people have been extremely brave. They're not afraid of what happened to us. It's only invigorated the movement, and that keeps me going.
Do you have other SDS chapters in Florida?
Yeah. Yep. In a bunch of schools, actually. Florida State University has an SDS chapter. UCF, I think, has some folks trying to start an SDS chapter. It had one years ago. USF, University of North Florida in Jacksonville, has an SDS chapter that has won a lot of historic gains, such as they actually did get increased Black enrollment because of the Black student leaders in that chapter actually won it in around 2019, I believe. So and they reached a historic admission of Black students to that school. And Jacksonville is a Black town, so it was kind of horrendous how low the enrollment was at UNF. But yeah, we're all over the place.
This is good. And, being arrested will probably end up being a good thing in your life. I will confess to my first arrest was the free speech movement at Berkeley in 1964. And I'm very grateful that they dragged us out of Sproul Hall, and things led to where they led. I want to thank both Lauren Pineiro and Chrisley Carpio. You've been a great interview, and I'm hoping I get to meet you. I don't know how long you're here, but Tampa, Florida is not a place that I'm opposed to going to again. I try to stay out of these red states a little bit, but when it's cold up here, the South calls.
Yes.
Okay. Any parting words you'd like to share with the Live from the Heartland folks?
No, just thank you for the show of support and solidarity. Please put it on paper and send it to Susie Lopez. Tell her drop the charges. And we'll see you in the streets.
Right on, sisters. All power to the people.
Thanks. All power to the
Everybody
people.
else, stay tuned. We'll take a little musical break and we'll be right back with more Live from the Heartland here on the left end of your dial. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Live from the Heartland. I am your host, Michael James, and it always brings me a lot of pleasure to talk with this next guest I have. He's a long-standing comrade brother, someone who I bring into my class at DePaul on activism to talk to the young students. And he's an inspirational guy. He used to run track, and he's a hell of a revolutionary. The one, the only Lamar Billy Brooks of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party. Good afternoon to you, Billy.
Hello, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing okay, brother. How are you?
That's good. Hanging in there. Each day is a life, and I try to take it to the hill.
Well, that's good. And I do want to say that my students always love it when you come to class. You're real good, and I hope that the radio listening audience and the YouTube and TV viewing audience gets as much pleasure out of seeing you and hearing you talk as I do.
You have an exceptional group of young people every year who inspire me. I love to talk to young people. So here I am.
Here you are. So how about let's start off. There's a lot of old timers listening to this show who probably know a lot about the Black Panther Party, but let's do a little refresher for people on the Black Panther Party in general and particularly the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party. I know you were around deep into it, close to Chairman Fred. So give us a little bit of information, Billy.
Well, 1968 was a year of pure turmoil around the world. The Vietnam War was raging. Everybody was trying to put together some kind of mass organizational structure to have an impact. I happened to join the Black Panther Party as a student at Wilson Junior College, which is now Kennedy King, and I met this young man by the name of Fred Hampton, who later became the deputy chairman of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party. Our focal point at that time was getting to know each other, figuring out who we were and what we wanted to do. But within that process, we discovered that our passions were manifested in serving the people. The 10-point platform and program, as it was written, was not revolutionary in itself. It was more of a survival kit. This is something I've learned over the years of struggling. And in the process of implementing survival programs, we met many people. We made many enemies. Biggest enemy were the Chicago Police Department and the mayor at that time, Dick Daley, and the state's attorney's office with Edward V. Hanrahan. He had a compatriot named Richard Jolovic. And we got to know those cats pretty well. Our main charge was to implement survival programs. And the first program we put out there was the Breakfast for School Children program in 1969 in April at the Better Boys Foundation. We also immediately began working on a medical center, Spurgeon Jack Medical Center on 16th Street. 3950 was 16th Street, right across the street from Penn School. All these various and sundry activities, as I said earlier, brought us a lot of enemies. But it also allowed us to integrate ourselves into the community, not just the Black community, you know, but the brown community, you know, the white community, you know, wherever people wanted to struggle, you know, that was our whole understanding, you know, developing allies and building coalitions. And I think that more than anything else created an opportunity for them to vilify us to a point where they could just pretty much do whatever it was they wanted to do to us, you know, as an organization. You know, their number one process was COINTELPRO. You know, so when I talk to young people today, I emphasize that it's very critical that you are able to vet people that you associate with. We didn't have social media then, but now you can vet people like that. You know, there's no more William O'Neills out here. You could check them out. And that was one of our main bugaboos, just trusting people, you know. So if you're going to struggle, make sure you're struggling with someone that you can ideologically and philosophically and politically engage with so you can get better at what you do.
Billy, you mentioned William O'Neill. Let's just let the people know who he is. I remember talking to him once when I was in the courthouse at 26 in California on a bus that I had. And that's before I knew who he was and what he did. You want to let everyone know about him?
Well, I mentioned the word COINTELPRO, which was a government program sponsored by J. Edgar Hoover
Of the FBI.
And the FBI. And the whole intent of it was to identify people who could infiltrate your organization and create havoc, you know, disruptions to keep people on edge. Because of COINTELPRO and folk like William O'Neill, who was very instrumental in the assassination of Chairman Fred Hampton on December the 4th, you know, and they still do it today. You know, as long as you're struggling against injustice and white supremacy, you're going to have that issue, you know, and Mike know it well, you know, that one of our biggest obstacles was developing camaraderie. You know, I would say 85-95% of the people who went to jail because of trumped up charges, which were instigated by the FBI. You know, yeah. You know, and William O'Neill was a prime example. You know, he like the protocol. You know, he was one of those guys who could do everything. You know, whatever you need, O'Neill could get. So if you got an O'Neill around you,
be careful.
Watch him.
Yeah, so he was the guy that basically drugged Fred Hampton and was the inside guy for the government. And he later was overrun by a car on a freeway. Well, you think he was assassinated or you think he just took his own life?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I probably have as much information, but he was such a coward that and a sleazeball that I could not see him, this is just my thought, Kyle was just, don't do that, so it's possible he had a little help getting over on the expressway. I wouldn't know.
Yeah. Oh, I don't want to get hung up in that. I just, it was a tragedy. Tell for the people who may not know, which is pretty doubtful for the listeners to this show, but a little bit about Fred Hampton and what he was. I mean, he was a charismatic guy. Political analysis was right on, inspirational. That's partly why the COINTEL program and Hoover took him out, that they saw him as a potential messiah figure, a big time leader. And some people may have seen the film. You could tell me what you think about that. Go ahead.
Fred was very compassionate, very sincere, very dedicated, very committed, revolutionary. He believed in leading by example. He often talked about what we were doing and how we were doing it, as opposed to what we're gonna do. When there were situations that came up, his clarity and his insight was just phenomenal. He left a legacy that is manifested in anyone who was considering committed to continue on with. The movie, I encourage people to watch The Assassination of Fred Hampton, The Murder of Fred Hampton by Mike Gray and Howard Alt, two very good friends who are no longer here. But I believe that truth has to be based on facts, not Hollywood. So anyone who was around in the 60s and knew how the pigs moved, knew the temperature that was in the community, and had an opportunity to watch that movie, Judas and the Black Messiah, probably would think they was watching some Twilight Zone bullshit. Because that's what it was. None of those scenes happened. None of them. It was all creative vilification. Yeah, creative vilification. That's what Hollywood does, That's their purpose, Yeah, that's what I think about it.
Billy Brooks, let me ask you a little bit about the legacy of the party, both in Illinois and nationally. We've seen a lot of things come down since then. We've seen the rise of Black politicians, progressive movements. We've seen people assassinated, people killed by the police. We've seen massive demonstrations. We've seen the government, in some cases, move to do things that groups like the Panthers did, whether it be healthcare or food for kids, that kind of thing. Obviously not enough, but tell us what you think you can point to that was a success, a failure, or something that is still in motion and moving forward.
First thing I'm going to say is a protracted struggle.
I like it.
Our journey, started way before 1966 when the party was formally organized out in Oakland. It's a continuation of survival. One of the unique things about the Black Panther Party was that it had ideology, they had a philosophical process to it, which pretty much defined the politics of it. And the politics of it was manifested in the 10-point platform and program, whereas each one of those points were related to a specific program. If you look at the conditions today with police brutality and murder, people of color, you look at the healthcare situation, you look at the housing situation, you look at the judicial process, you look at the criminal justice system as part of the penal colony, as Huey used to say. And that struggle is still going on for social justice on so many levels because we did not get to a point where we could physically process it. But the ideology, the philosophical understanding is there because politically we spoke about a process of dialectical materialism, which in essence means dealing with the conditions as they actually exist. I spoke earlier about truth and how that truth has to be grounded in facts. Well, the fact of the matter is that the current political atmosphere in this country, from the White House on down to City Hall, down on LaSalle, even though we do have a new mayor, the conditions that exist for poor people, period, are atrocious.
Yes.
So that's why it's a protracted struggle. Politically, one would think that if we could get enough elected officials, just on a city level, statewide level of conscious, progressive people, who represent their constituents. When I say represent, I'm talking about meeting their basic needs, And then it wouldn't matter so much about who the mayor is, because each person down there will represent the needs of their constituents. And that was one of the things that the Black Panther Party, on many levels, tried to do. Did it work? It only will work if you have people who are principled, like Chairman Fred, people who are committed. What it's going to take for us to get there, don't want to sound like Dr. King, but I do believe we're going to get to the promised land.
I hope so.
No, I do. We have some beautiful young people, Mike.
We do.
You see, they won't change. Our job is to give them the information that they need to help them avoid the pitfalls, and the disasters that plagued what we were trying to do back in the day.
Well, we only got a couple minutes left, so why don't we continue on that with you sharing any thoughts you might have or advice to the young organizers, activists, people who are getting involved so that they can be involved in the protracted struggle over the long haul?
But I think the most important thing is to understand what the struggle is. The struggle is about people coming together, people working together, people loving each other, people caring about each other, and people wanting to do better. When we were young, we saw that, but we didn't see all the barriers,
There's a lot of them.
Yeah. And for young people now, they just have to stay fact-based, and when someone show you who they are, believe that that's who they are, believe that's who they are, and you need to get rid of them in a way where you're going to associate with them. Have to be very clear. It's just like, like I tell your students, if you picking a partner, you want to know about that partner. That partner gonna want to know about you. You know what I'm saying? In order for y'all to develop any trust, any concern, any care, or any respect, it's a process. So go through that process and always deal with things as they actually exist.
Right on, brother. And we're out of time. And I'll be seeing you real soon. So I want to thank you for coming on the show. And
tomorrow,
we are going to meet up tomorrow, you and me. Billy Brooks, Billy Che Brooks, Billy Lamar, Billy Brooks. You're a hell of a guy, and I'm honored to have you as one of my friends. Thanks a lot.
Right on.
Okay. And for everybody else out there, we're so glad you tuned in to Live from the Heartland today, however you got it, on TV, on YouTube, on podcasts, or on air. We'll be back next week with some more great guests. I want to thank Lauren Pineiro and Chrisley Carpio of the Tampa 5. I want to thank Billy Brooks. I want to thank our producers, Lynn Orman, Katie Hogan, and Tom Clark. And I want to thank our engineer, Hal James. I'm Michael James. Do good in the world. The world needs all the good that you do. All power to the people.